Hey everyone, Captivate here. I've been playing Nami for a little while now. I have a couple hundred games with her in the sim, and I've taken her to my locals the past 2 weeks and won both of them, which means I've gone 8-0 with her in person. So I think I'm able to give you all a pretty good guide on how to play her, and I'm going to go over some of the things that I wish I knew when I started playing her. Before we get started, if you do like the video, please give it a like and subscribe. It really means a lot to me, and it shows me that you all want me to continue doing this and making more content, either with more deck lists or gameplay videos. I would be able to record live in-person games if that's something you all want to see. I have a lot of ideas, so if there's anything that you would like to see from this channel, just let me know in the comments, and I would love to do that, especially as we get ready to go into the OP-06 meta here in the West. So let's get started. Nami has an additional rule that says when your deck reaches 0 cards, you win the match rather than losing it. And this is really cool because this means when you hit 0 cards at any point, even if it's on your opponent's turn. So we win on our opponent's turns pretty often with the amount of counters that we run. And I'll go over all of that with the deck list later. Now, moving on, Kaya and Sanji's Pilaf are definitely the two best cards in the deck. Now, Kaya says that when you play her, you draw 2 cards and trash 2 cards, and that's for 1 Dawn. So getting to go through 2 cards for 1 Dawn is incredible. You effectively do lose 1 card from your hand because you play her, you draw 2, trash 2. So you are effectively 1 card less in your hand, but getting to go through 2 cards for 1 Dawn is really, really good. Kaya also has a 2k counter. I don't think she should ever be used as counter unless it's going to save you from losing the game. That's the only time I ever personally use her as counter. But we also have Sanji's Pilaf, which you get to just draw 2 cards. That's awesome. You get to get 2 cards back in your hand for 3 Dawn, and if it's ever in your life, you get to use the main effect for free. And pretty much every Nami list runs at least 2 Brickfists. I think the most popular list runs 4, and Brickfist is awesome because you can put Kaya back in your hand. So you can spend 1 Dawn, play Kaya, 2 more Dawn to put her back in your hand, and then you can play her again. So for 4 Dawn, you get to go through 4 cards, which is really cool, especially because when you start the game, you draw 5 cards, and then you put 5 cards in your life in a 50 card deck, so you have 40 cards left that you have to get through to win the game with Nami. Now, triggers are a huge part of this deck. That we run 4 of them, and we run 4 copies of all 4 because of the triggers. Impel Down All-Stars is a very interesting card in the deck. When I first saw the list, I was like, well, Nami is not an Impel Down, so you can't actually use the effect when you trash 2 cards. This card is only in the deck for the trigger because the trigger is that good, because you get to draw 2 cards off of it, and because of the nature of the deck, we trash a lot of cards out of our hand, which I will go over later. Impel Down All-Stars is always a good target to trash with. So all 4 of these cards draw you 2 cards if they're in your life. So if you get crazy lucky and have all 5 cards have these triggers, then you now get to go through 10 cards for free. Generally, if you have 3 in your life, you win the game, just because of the nature of the deck once you've been playing it. If I ever have a game where I have 3 of these in my life, if it's any of the 3, I usually win because that 6 extra cards is huge for free. Yeah, so moving on, I'm going to talk about starting hands. Generally, the way that I do starting hands is if I do not have a Kaya or a Sanji's Pilaf, I will mulligan. That is pretty much the one card that I want to see, because getting to use Kaya on turn 1, spend 1 Dawn just to get her out, it gives you a filter that you can look for the cards that you're going to need in that matchup, and it also just gets you going. And then Sanji's Pilaf is awesome just to get your hand back up in size. One thing that you should think about with your starting hand is if you have a lot of trigger cards in your hand, it means they're not going to be in your life. So if you have a Kaya and 2 or 3 Impel Down All-Stars, it's probably better to mulligan it, because this means that these cards aren't going to be in your life, and obviously we want them in our lives. It's just the nature of the game that you're going to have some trigger cards in your hand, but it's definitely something to think about, that if you look at your 5 cards and 3 or 4 of them are trigger cards that you want to have in life, you should probably mulligan if you can. So because of things like Kaya, where she draws 1 and trashes 1, we trash a lot in the deck. We also have Brickfist, which I'll talk about in a minute. Generally, we just trash a lot of cards, and the order of trashing that I found to be best is if you ever have an Impel Down All-Stars, trash that. That doesn't do anything in your hand, so that's a really easy trash. And then next we have Deathwink. Now Deathwink says that it costs 3 Dawn, and you get to increase your leader or character by 6,000 power, which is a huge jump for those bigger swings. But the main reason that we run this card is you get to draw cards until you have 2 cards in your hand. And the way that this works is it looks at your hand size after you play it. So if you play this card as your last card in hand, you effectively have 0 cards, which means you get to draw 2. So generally, I always want to play Deathwink as my very last card in my hand to draw up to 2 cards. So if I ever have more than 1, I will trash 1 just to keep the 1 in my hand. And then finally, I will generally trash one of these options, Desert Spada. When you play it, it's really great to filter the cards in your deck, either by putting them on the top or the bottom, and you get to go through them, but it doesn't actually get you through your deck in the sense that it doesn't let you draw or trash cards like some of the other events that we run in the deck. So I'll trash that one. And then we also have Mr. 1. Mr. 1, when you play Mr. 1, you get to get a 1 cost event from your trash to your hand. He's awesome, he's great. But if you already have 1 cost events in your hand, I would trash him and keep the events, because it gets to save you 1 Dawn by not having to replay him if you trashed the events. And because we are in such a removal heavy meta, Zeph generally gets removed the turn you play him. He is really good if you can get him to stick and swing with him for a turn or 2, but if I'm playing like black or something that I know is going to remove the characters on my board, like blue is another one that is going to either bounce him or put him on the bottom of my deck, I'll generally trash Zeph unless I know that I can use him. Brickfist is another one. It's a very good card, but it's pretty much dead in hand. There's no counter on it, so I'll usually trash this one if I'm looking for things to trash on my opponent's turn when I'm playing events. So need to know, this is the bread and butter combo of this deck. We have Love Beam, Gum Gum Giant Gavel, and Deathwink. Now Love Beam says that you draw 1 card if you have 3 or less cards in your hand. Now this works if you have 4 cards, because you get to play Love Beam and now you have 3 cards, so you get to draw back up to 4. That's how that card works. And then we have Gum Gum Giant Gavel, which you play that card, you trash 1 card from your hand, and then you trash the top 2 cards of your deck. Now the way that this combo works is we play Love Beam first, which will draw us 1 card. Now we then play Gum Gum Giant Gavel to trash that 1 card, so we now have the 1 Deathwink in hand, and we get to draw back up to 2 cards. So this one gets us to draw 1 card, this one gets us to trash 2 cards, so that's 3 cards, and then this one gets us to draw 2 cards. So we get to counter out of a 9k, a 9k, and 11k, and all for 6 Dawn, while we draw 5 cards of our deck. So this is one combo that you really, generally, if you have 3 cards in hand, you want to try to get them to be these 3 so that you can bounce through this combo like this. Now Buggy is another card. I see a lot of people talk about not liking Buggy. I think Buggy has a ton of value. He gets to search Impel Down cards, which I'll talk about when we go over the deck list, but the way that he does is you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, reveal 1 Impel Down card, which again, I'll talk about when we get to the deck list, but the important part about Buggy is you take the other cards and put them on the bottom of your list, or your deck, sorry. So that means that when we look at Buggy and say we have these 5 cards here, we can grab an Impel Down card. So Brickfist is an Impel Down card, Deathwink is also an Impel Down card, which means that if we do this, we can grab the Deathwink with Buggy and then take these other 4 and put them on the bottom of our deck in any order. Now this is important because we're playing Nami when we want to get through our deck. So whenever you play Buggy, you want to try and set your deck up to effectively win the game if you get to where you've set up. So you can see here, I've put, this was the order, let's just say we have them like this when I draw these 5. So now if I go this way and look at the 5, I would draw the Deathwink with Buggy, put this in my hand, and then I would go Love Beam, Gum Gum Giant Gavel, and then Brickfist and Apis. And I do this because if I play Love Beam, that means that I can draw Gum Gum Giant Gavel. And then I can play Gum Gum Giant Gavel if I have another card in my hand to trash. So now I trash 2 cards and I win the game. So now I know if I get to my last 4 cards, I know what my last 4 are and how to play them out and what I can trash around, things of that nature. So if you play, 1, 2, 3 Buggies in a game, you now know the last 4, 8, 12 cards of your deck, and that's huge when you know almost a fourth of your deck of cards. So yeah, general tips and tricks of playing Nami. The cards in your deck are general knowledge, and anyone can count them, and you should count them as often as you can. Just keep a count, especially when you're like halfway through the game and you're really trying to decide if you should take a hit or not. One thing that I said before is you have 40 cards in your deck after you've drawn your hand and you've drawn your life, which means you have 5 life and 40 cards. That means, as a general rule of thumb, I like to look at it as 8 cards in deck per life. So, you know, if I get under 20 cards and I have 3 life left, I know I'm doing really good. Yeah. Also, look at your graveyard. There is a lot of information to be found in your graveyard and your hand, because if you have 3 cards left in your deck and you haven't been able to play a buggy, so you don't know what they are, you can look at your hand and try to figure out what's in your life if you have 2 or 3 cards in your life and what's in your deck, and just kind of do the mathematical probability of, oh, I only have seen 1 Sanji's Pilaf, which means there's 3 of them between my deck and my life. That's just one thing to think about when you're countering out and things like that. If you definitely are going to die on the next turn, if they have, 5 things that are going to swing into you, and you only have 2 cards in hand and 1 life, and they swing at you with the last character, go ahead and take that life, because a lot of times there are instances where Kaya could be your last life, and being able to play that Kaya on your turn means that you get to win the game because you played her. Whereas if you countered out of the attack, they would have hit you, you would have put the Kaya in your hand and then died that next turn. So that's definitely something to think about as well. So yeah, matchups. I think Nami has a really good matchup into most of the meta. Sakazuki, Katakuri, and Enel are probably, I think she's 55-60% favorite in those once you learn how to play her. And then Purple Luffy is by far the worst matchup for Nami. It's almost an insta-loss. I think I've won like 1 out of 15 or 20 games with Purple Luffy. Just the way that he's able to ramp on and hit you as hard as he does, as fast as he does, it makes it really hard to counter out of the attacks that he has before, because generally he's going to hit you for 6, 7s, 9s, all before you get to 10 Dawn, and it's really hard to counter out of those with the limited number of Dawn that you have. So yeah, this is the Nami list. This is the Nami list that has been played for a couple sets now. So we have Buggy that I talk about. Mr. 1 gets you 1-cost events from the trash. So generally with Mr. 1, you're going to want to grab the Gum Gum Giant Gavel, which is the one that I talked about in the combos, where you trash 1 and then trash 1 from your hand and then trash 2 from your deck. So this card is really good. You get to go through 2 cards for 1 Dawn. Granted, you do lose a card from hand, but it also gets you to 9,000. We already talked about Kaya. Kaya is incredible in the deck, easily one of the best cards with Sanji's Pilaf. Apis is generally in the deck because she's a 2K. So she has an ability that says you may trash 2 cards from your hand and look for an East Blue card. This ability is great if you know the last couple cards of your deck and you know you're not going to whiff. Go ahead and play her, use her ability. Maybe you know that there's a Sanji's Pilaf that you're going to go into, and then now you can play the Sanji's Pilaf and potentially win the game off of that. She's awesome, but generally she is a 2K, and I use her as a 2K pretty often. Zeph is, when you play Zeph, you get to return a character that costs 3 or less from your board to your hand, so you can return a Kaya, and that is for your opponent as well. You can return their characters as well. But generally you play Zeph, you can return a Kaya to your hand, and then you trash 2 cards from the top of your deck. Now you can replay Kaya, and his ability is that when you have 1 Dawn on him, and he attacks your opponent's life, and he deals damage, then you can trash the top 6 cards of your deck. Desert Spada is another one that we talked about, where you just look at the top 3 cards and either put them on the top or bottom of your deck in any order. One of the things that I do like about this card is there are times when you will play Buggy and you will see 3 Kayas and a Pilaf, or 2 Pilafs and a Kaya, and now you're like, dang, that's 3 of my draw cards. So if that ever happens and I know I put them on the bottom of my deck, I'll usually try to play as many Buggies and Spadas as I can to put cards back on the bottom of my deck, to try to get back to those cards quicker now that I know where they're at and I know that they're on the bottom. Impel Down All-Stars, like we said, is only a trigger. That is literally the only reason it's in the deck. Usopp's Rubber Band is Your leader or character gains 2,000 power, and then you trash one from the top of your deck. So you just get to go through a card and get a little bit of counter. We already talked about Gum Gum Giant Gavel, and then Level of Mellow, which was in the combo with Gavel and then Deathwink. Brickfist is the one where you get to return a cost 4 or less character to their owner's hand. I frequently like to use those with Kaya, but definitely don't be afraid to just bounce one of your opponent's characters. If you're playing Sakazuki and they play a 4-drop Borsellino or Lucci or something like that, just stick it back in their hand. You know they can't attack with it next turn. So yeah, generally a really good card. Deathwink, you get to draw you draw up to 2 cards in your hand, so I like to play this last if possible, and then you draw the 2 cards. And then finally, Sanji's Pilaf, easily the best card in the deck. You get to draw 2 cards, and its trigger is completely free. So there are some alternative cards that a lot of people like to play. I've experimented and tested, and I have found that this list is the most consistent list that I've had success with. Mihawk is a replacement for Apis. He just says that when you attack with one Dawn, you effectively get a Kaya trigger. So that's really good, but he costs 4, and once you swing with him once, usually your opponents will swing into him and attack him, which is awesome because they don't attack your life, so that's good. But if you're playing black, he generally just gets removed. Nojiko is a replacement that a lot of people run instead of Brickfist. And that's because she says with cost 5 or less. Purple Luffy has a lot of cost 5 cards that she helps out with that matchup a lot, but I think the Brickfist being able to put Kaya's back in your own hand is too important in my opinion, but definitely experiment with her and see how you like it. 3000 Worlds is another one that people have run in some of their decks. You just get to put a cost 5 or less at the bottom of its owner's library, so you just get to remove a character. I think that it's too much Dawn for what it does personally, and you don't really get ahead by playing it. You more just stop them from attacking you. So yeah, that's my opinion on those cards. Feel free to test them and see how you like them, and if you have any other alternative cards, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm always willing to try different decks and new cards. Looking forward to OP-06. Nami gets even better because we get White Snake. Now, White Snake says your leader or characters gains 1,000 power for this turn, and then you get an unconditional draw 1. So the way that I've been playing White Snake is, rather than running the 2 Apis, I will replace her with White Snake, and then I will remove 2 Zephs. So that's the deck list I'm planning on playing and have been playing on the sim in OP-06. And I have been having a lot of success with it. White Snake helps a lot with the decks that like to go wide, like Zoro is one that goes wide, and then Enel is another one if they're running the Sky Island variant that goes really, really wide. So yeah, that is my guide for Nami. Thank you all for watching, and I'm going to be posting some gameplay videos if you want to see how I play Nami. And like I said before, if you guys like this and want to keep it coming, please let me know in the comments. I would love to do more of these. I play a lot of One Piece, and I go to local events usually once, twice, sometimes 3 times a week. So yeah, feel free to let me know. Thank you all for watching.